Okay, so I am doing a replacement of the inner axle seal and the swivel hub rebuild on my old FJ40 Land Cruiser. Now, as I'm doing this job, I've done a little bit of research before I started. I needed to make sure that I had all the parts. I've got a rebuild kit, new bearings, new seals. I've got everything new that I need. But one thing that was a little bit of a mystery to me before I started was these shims. Okay, so I'm not going to go on about how to do the rebuild. This is all about how to figure out how to get these shims right. The only instructions that I had were basically when you're dismantling the upper and lower arms, the bearing, I guess you call them retainers, to just simply put in the shims that were there, just not to get them mixed up and just put them back in the way you found them. But I figured there must be something else to it. There must be more to it. So I've gone to the trusty manual, the trusty Toyota instruction book, and in it is very, very clear as to what to do, and I thought I might do a quick video on it. That's the special service tool that we need. The number is right there. It is SST 09634-60013. I've managed to find one. I've borrowed one of a mate. It looks like this. Okay, and I thought today what I might do is just quickly follow those instructions and show you guys how to do it. So the outcome of what we're trying to achieve is to confirm that the shims that we've taken off from our when we pull the thing apart before we started to rebuild it are actually the correct shims for our purpose. The idea is twofold. Those shims will make sure that we've got the correct preload on the bearings, one in there and one in there, so they're not squishing too hard or not too loose. And the other thing is that it will center the knuckle properly onto the ball, onto the swivel. Okay, so if it's too far up, what we'll have is a problem, because then the CV will be under stress in the upward direction. That's if there's too much of a shim at the bottom. If there's too much of a shim at the top, there will be downward force on it, and the balls inside these inside the CV joint won't be in a relaxed state. So that's the idea. We need to make sure that those shims are of the right thickness. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go and follow the instructions. The first thing that we need to do is to install our top and bottom bearings. Okay, so we are going to firstly put in the special service tool into the where the inner axle seal would usually go. So that's this piece here. There's these two pieces fit together, and they just drop in nice and neatly into that hole. It's a machined surface, so it all fits in rather neatly like that. Again, the idea is that that point there forms a little scratch mark onto this center pin that we're going to put in here, which is this one here. Now I've used it on the other side, and you can see the markings that I put on it from the other side. So I'm going to put something on top of that, just so when we do this side, we're not going to see those scratch marks. We're going to make new scratch marks. Okay, so I've just opted to just put a little bit of red paint. I think red is probably going to be the easiest colour to see scratches through. I'm looking for that silver scratch mark later on, so I'm just going to leave that to dry for a sec. While I'm doing that, I'm going to go and install the bearings in the top and bottom. While I'm doing that, I'll just tap them into the top and into the bottom. I'll be careful to make sure that the race sits in the same cap, so they're married up. And I'll also install some nice new grease into the bearings. All right, so the bearings are seated in the top and in the bottom. I'm holding the bearing race here. This is the pin that we're going to be screwing in from the bottom towards the top. There's a nut over on this side, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that in now. Okay, so I've put it in from the bottom. There's the bearing in the bottom. You can see that there. It's gone right through to the top. And I'll do that nut up. I'll do that nut up with the arm in place. I'm missing the arm, so I'm just going to put that arm on now. Okay, so that is what it looks like all fitted up. We've got the SST installed. We've got this arm here. That's obviously a very precise length. Now what we need to do is just do up that nut at the top. so that it is at the correct tension to preload these bearings as to what it's going to be at the end. Okay, so it's quite a precise measurement. I've got these little cheap scales which have done the job on the other side, which will tell me when I'm at the correct preload of between 1.8 and 3.8 kilos. Okay, so it needs to be at 1.8 to 3.8 kilos when I am steering. Okay, so that's just to make sure though that the measurement will be correct when I take the measurement. Yep. This might be a little bit hard to show, but you'll be able to see that little red needle moving to about 3 kilos to get it to turn. About there. Okay, so that's preload set. I'm going to leave that as it is. Okay, so now it's time to start measuring. So that's all in place. We see there's, on the special service tool, there's this little step here. We need to measure from that little step down to the bottom step over here. Okay, so I'm just going to bring the vernier out and do that. Here's the vernier rule. You're going to need one of these. So here we can see we're at 167.9. Okay, that's where we landed. Okay, so I'm going to write that down. Next measurement to take will be the overall height of the knuckle itself. Okay, so you can see I've got a place there from the top, whatever you call that, deck or surface, through to the bottom surface. We are at 165.4, 165.45, okay, 165.45. Okay, so I have just remeasured a little bit just to make sure I'm absolutely right. So the first measurement from that ledge there to the one at the bottom has for me come out at 167.9 millimeters, and the one from here to here has come out at 165.1. Okay, the difference being 2.8, which is the total shim thickness for the top and the bottom. Okay, so that plus that should be 2.8. And you know what? I've gone ahead and measured the total of those shims, and they come out to 2.8 exactly. So we know we're in the right ballpark. Now the only question we need to answer is the distribution of them between the top and the bottom correct? So we're going to measure that now. First thing we need to do is get the pin, which is in that part of the SST in there, to scribe a nice sharp line onto the pin that runs, what would be the king pin, if you like, that runs through the middle. So we're going to take that measurement now. Okay, I've just basically wiggled this back and forth so that it scratches that little spot, that little marker scratches into the paint that I put on there. Now that's the first piece. As I take this out, because that's the next step, so I'm going to take it out and I'm going to install it into the knuckle and take the measurement on the knuckle. Okay, now in order to do that, I need to make sure that when I take this pin out, I put it in the same, I orientate it the same way. So I've gone in from the bottom up through to the top with the nut at the top. So I'll do that. I'll have to orientate this knuckle housing in the way that will be when it's on the car, and go from the bottom to the top, nut at the top. Okay, because otherwise the measurement that we're going to take, which is basically the difference between the two lines, the first line's on there, the second line we're about to put on, will be obviously out if we get the orientation of that pin around the wrong way. So watch this. Okay, the next step is to install the spindle onto the knuckle. Okay, and we're not going to have any gaskets or anything on there. We're not going to have the backing plate. So we're just going to put in 2 bolts to hold that on out of the, whatever it is, 8 bolts. We're going to put 2 bolts in, and the instructions say to put 2 washers underneath each bolt. And the reason for that is because we haven't got the backing plate, which is way over there, the bolts would bottom out otherwise. So we're going to do that now. Okay, so this is how it looks. There's the knuckle. As I said, I've gone in the right way, so I've gone in from the bottom, nuts at the top. Those parts of the SST just fit neatly into the recesses, top and bottom, which is all good. The pin part fits inside the nice new brass bush without the collar this time, because the collar would be used for the inside of the knuckle itself. And there's the scratch mark that you can see there. The score mark there is from when it was up in here, and now we're going to spin this pin around and get a score mark from this part. For mine, it looks like it's going to be a really small gap. I'm just going to spin it around now. I can't do that while holding the camera, so I'm just going to do it now. Okay, this is all pretty fiddly. There's grease and stuff everywhere, but that's okay. You can see the two score marks there. All right, so they're not very clear, but I'm just going to take a measurement of what they are right now. Okay, we're just there, just there. And that's come out to a very small 2.5. I reckon they're 2.5 millimeters. Okay, the gap in the lines, 2. Yeah, whatever that is, 2. Sorry, misreading it. 3.5. All right, it's 3.5. Very good, 3.5 millimeters. All right, so I was misreading that, 3.5 mil. So I'm just going to write that one down and come back to you in a sec. So then, as we're reading this book, probably can't read it from there, but the sums say that the lower shim, okay, so the shim that goes into the lower part, will be 3 millimeters. Sorry, will be that measurement that we just took, which is 3.5 millimeters, minus 3 millimeters, which means that what needs to be in the bottom is actually 0.5 millimeter. So what should be in there, that is 0.5 millimeter. And I measured that before, and that is actually 0.5 millimeter. So we're actually spot on. I measured that with the vernier earlier, and that means that if the top one's 0.5 millimeter, then the bottom one will be 1.6, which is what I measured before. So this whole process has managed to prove that the shims that were in place at the beginning, before I measured everything, are actually completely correct. Okay, the formulas are all in the book, and I'll put a link in the video so you can see all of the measurements that I've taken. Okay, thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed the video.